Great. Thanks a lot. So I'm Stephen. I lead a couple of teams at the Geo Secretariat. I lead the science policy team. So that's a number of experts who work on the policy agendas that Geo works on globally. I'll talk about that. And I also lead the communications team. We're looking at thinking how to bring different activities together across the Geo work programme. So this notion of connected problems, having integrated solutions is really important. Next, please. There's been different ways to think about this, but this is according to the SDGs. If you look here, you can see how they've taken links across SDG 2, 3, 6, and 14, I think it is here. But you can see there are many other connections across different SDGs. So we've been trying to think about how do we look at trade-offs and synergies and other activities around integration as we are reviewing the work programme. Next, please. I just wanted to sort of make it clear that for us, Earth observations are sensors in, on, and around the Earth. So it's not just space-based, it's also in situ and models. Next, please. We focus on the global policy agendas, which are the UN 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and at the Geo Week last week, the countries approved, or the Geo members approved, urban resilience around the new urban agenda to be our fourth engagement priority. Next, please. So as I think it was Alessandro said, Geo is a pretty large community. We're probably working with about 120 countries. There are countries at the moment that are coming in, like Jordan, DRC, Singapore, that are not members but are working with us and want to come in as members. There are 140 participating organizations, and those are really international organizations like Eurisy, who are there to help us support the countries. And now we have a new category called associates, which is essentially private sector. Next, please. So you can see here the 140, Eurysy's kind of to the right and almost in the top corner. Actually not in the top corner, it's in the middle. But anyway, you can see some of the different types of organizations that have been supporting Geo, some of them for more than a decade. So these are the partner organizations, essentially. Next, please. We are split. You've heard from Emmanuel about EuroGeo. So we have AfriGeo, AmeriGeo, and AOGeo doing similar but different things for the regional requirements in each of those areas. And so that helps us take the global activity and scale it through the regional geos. Next, please. So the Geo Work Programme is really the place where everything happens. This is where the members, POs, associates, and others come together to look at how can we have a sort of an open way to discuss and take on sort of global challenges and other things that link to those global policy frameworks, and then produce what it says at the bottom, open reusable methods and results that can be applied. And so there are many ways of doing that. We've developed a knowledge hub, which is an open source tool, which is a presentation in itself. But the idea is to take all of the journals, the papers, the algorithms, the data, the methods, and make it all freely and openly available, following open science protocols. Next, please. So the work programme is broken into a number of different types of activities. You have the flagships, which are really the big activities that have a life of their own. They tend to have their own secretariat. They tend to have a lot of funding. So if you think about something like GeoBon, there's probably 3,500 members in GeoBon, the Biodiversity Observation Network. GeoGlam has about 45 partners. They have their own secretariat. and they're producing a monthly crop monitor for about 60 countries. So those are examples of the flagships. The regional geos we talked about, Eurogeo is one example. Then we have what are called pilot initiatives. These used to be called community activities, but they're now called pilots because it describes better what they're actually doing. So this notion of early stage projects that then move into being that sort of go from research into something more operational, and then they move into becoming initiatives. And initiatives, as it says here, they expand pilots into more demonstrable activities that have a broader or a wider user base. And then sort of underpinning a lot of that, you have foundational tasks. And so foundational tasks, for example, would be capacity development. There's a foundational task for capacity development that cuts across everything. There's a capacity development working group with about 60 members. There's a disaster risk reduction working group with about 100 members from about 40 or 50 countries. And then there's another one for climate change or climate action, which has, again, about 100 members from about 40 or 50 countries. And they're not all the same countries all the time. So that's kind of broadly the work program activities. And people sort of contribute, according to what they're working on, whether they're academia, research, private sector, or the national government agencies themselves. Next, please. So this is just a different way of looking at what we're doing. So there are the flagships, then there are the 20 initiatives and 36 community activities. So it's 60 activities in here, and many of these are actually programs in their own right. So you can't really work out from here, but it's agriculture, biodiversity, climate disasters, energy, land, forestry, water, urban, almost everything you can think of that you can do with Earth observations is covered under the work program. Next, please. So these are the flagships. Again, a different way of looking at them. Here in bold, it just kind of tells you the key areas that are being focused on. So National Forest Monitoring in red plus for GFOI, GeoGLAM for food security, GeoBond for biodiversity and ecosystem observations, and then GOS4M in terms of mercury monitoring. Next, please. So because Eurisy is coming in as a program board member, the program board, in terms of governance, we have the Geosecretariat, where I'm based, and we have about, let's say, 25 people here. And quite often, so most of my team are people who are from different countries. So I have a secondee from Japan. I'm going to get another person from Germany. So I have someone from Italy, someone from France. So that's how we used to work a lot by just getting the countries to give us a lot of secondees. But we're growing the number of full-time staff as well, which is obviously a bit of a different budgetary model. So we have the Secretariat, and we kind of coordinate everything across all of the different governance aspects. Then we have the program board, which looks at the work program. And so Eurisy has been successful in being picked to be on the work program from going forward. And so that's about 40 different organizations. So I think it's almost half and half countries and participating organizations. And then you have the executive committee, which is only made up of countries, which is 16 countries. But there are one or two participating organizations that are observers. So CEOS, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, has been an observer for several years, and so has IEEE. They've been observers. But the executive committee is mainly made up of countries, and it's 4 countries from each of the caucuses. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the detail, but it tries to be representative. So we have like 3 countries from Africa, a couple of countries from Europe, a couple of countries from Asia, from the Americas, and that's kind of how it's made up. But what you can see here is the work program timeline going forward is we have work programs that last. We're currently in the 2019 to 2021 program, and then we're moving into the 2022 to 2024 program. So you can see here that we've put the call out now for new plans. And the idea is that this integrative notion of, you know, if something's happening in agriculture, how does that link to water and vice versa? You know, these synergies and trade-offs. And then, you know, if something's happening with water, what does that mean for soil? And then what does that mean? So all of these things are linked together. So that's what we're trying to do. And it could be looking at food security and urban sprawl. You know, so we're trying to think about all these things that are connected, because too often things are done in isolation, and so we want to move away from that and get people talking more and sharing data and ideas and concepts. So that's really it. The first meeting that I think Eurisy will attend will be in February, the programme board meeting in February, and that is where the plan preparation discussions will take place. Then there will be review through April and May, and then we have the Geo Symposium, which is where we bring together all of the different work programme activities. So it's like a showcase opportunity for people in the work programme. And then there's a further revision of the plan, and then the GEO principles, so the people from the GEO members, who are the countries, will be consulted on, I guess, the near final version of the plan, and then it will go to the plenary at the end of October in 2022 for the approval, and then we'll have the next version of the work programme for the next 3 years. So I don't really get involved in this so much, apart from I try to help work programme activities with things like resource mobilisation, communications, capacity development. The sort of non-process stuff is more what my team handles. Craig and his team look more at the work programme, but hopefully this gives you a feel for what it is. And there's only going to be 1 or 2 of you from Eurisy anyway who are on the programme board. So for those kind of process questions, you'll have to speak to Craig anyway, because you'll be quite involved at some point. Next slide, please. So really, to sort of summarise what I've been saying is, this integrative approach, which I've been talking about, where we want to look at policy, governance and finance. And then we want to engage more of the different communities and look at it through a sort of impact lens, which we've tried to do in the last couple of years, but it's quite hard to do sort of monitoring and evaluation and come up with learning as well on some of the types of projects we've been running. And then we've been looking at moving more towards open knowledge. If you go to the next slide, please. We've been working on open data, open standards, open software and open science for the first 3 for many years. Open science only really for the last 2 or 3 years, but we have called all of this broadly open knowledge. And so this is what's underpinning most of the work that GEO does. Next one, please. And really, we're taking the open knowledge. We're also developing what are called policy briefs.
Toujours en vidéoconférence.
We're also developing policy briefs, which are essentially 2 to 3 page documents for policymakers to understand how to use Earth observations, for example, for landslides, for wildfires, for different areas. And then we produce practical guidance, which is, okay, what data would you need? Where do you find that data and how do you access it? And then the 4th one is routes to finance. So is there funding available to do some of these types of activities? Next one, please. I'm coming close to the end. So we ran a climate workshop on climate policy and climate finance in September. And if you go to the tiny URL, you can get the report there. It's a 50-page report. So it just talks about, we're going to have a climate finance track going forward starting next year. Next one, please. And at the same time, we were in Glasgow, which was great for me as a Scot, We were at COP26 and we issued this report on greenhouse gas monitoring from space. We did it with the WGIC, the World Geospatial Industry Council, and with Al Gore's team at Climate Trace. So again, I encourage you to read that. It's another 50-page report, but it talks about methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide, and the sensors and the missions, or the missions and the sensors that are currently available to help, or some of the planned ones. Next one, please. So, like I said, we're trying to look at it from this kind of results, impact, and value. I'm not going to go through because I want to wrap up in a second. Next one, please. And you'll all have the slides, I presume, anyway. 2019, we created the Geo-Indigenous Alliance, and so we have about 1,200 members now from Indigenous communities. And so this is great because we're helping marginalised and underrepresented communities from around the world to work with Earth observations and to think about taking traditional knowledge and putting it together with state-of-the-art technology. Next, please. So I just wanted to give you some of the outcomes from GeoWeek, because this will be important for the work programme and for the programme board. But we had our first youth track, so we're now going to have Geo Youth, which is a community of practice. We're putting terms of reference together for that. We had a third industry track, which Emmanuel was very much involved in. I'm guessing another 300 or 400 people were involved in that. And then we had the adoption of the Open Knowledge Statement and the adoption of our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Statement. So if you can just go through the next few slides quite quickly, I think that just takes me to one final slide. So I've talked about that. Next one, please. The youth track, that's fine. Next one, please. Again, that's fine. And there should be one, I think, one final one here after industry track. Okay, I didn't put it in, but we also have about 70 projects running with Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google, Esri, Synergies, a number of private sector organizations, which is about probably about somewhere around $15–16 million that we've brought in to help Geo members to work with cloud services, and to, again, to kind of lower the barriers for access to state-of-the-art technology, particularly for least developed countries and low and middle income countries. So I'll stop there. It's quite hard to give an overview of such a global network in less than about 15 minutes. So I know I went over, but I think the whole meeting's gone over, so I hope I'm not too late.